Well, let's take a closer look at the use of sustainable aviation fuel. Although it is a pathway to net zero emissions, it still emits carbon dioxide. Another greener way to power planes with absolutely zero emissions is by using hydrogen. In fact, hydrogen packs about 3 times the amount of energy per unit of mass than conventional jet fuel. And one way is to use a hydrogen fuel cell. It works like a regular battery, moving electrons around a circuit. Hydrogen is fed into one side and oxygen into the other, with a membrane in between. Hydrogen flows over a catalyst which separates the protons and electrons. The protons are able to pass through the membrane to reach the oxygen, but the electrons cannot. Instead, the electrons have to make their way around a circuit and, in the process, power a motor. The hydrogen electrons then reunite with protons and oxygen to form H2O, or, of course, water. Water together with heat are the only emissions that come from this whole process. So, why aren't more flights using hydrogen? Well, there are limitations. At the moment, at least, for it to go large scale. First, of course, is the cost. Although hydrogen is one of the most abundant elements, isolating it from water, for example, well, that requires the process of electrolysis, which is expensive. Containing hydrogen is another problem. Liquid hydrogen is more dense and takes about 4 times more space than the equivalent amount of jet fuel. Now, that means that the need for bigger fuel tanks, which would require planes and airports to be redesigned.
And from on this, we have with us Shantanu Gangakhedkar. He's Senior Consultant, Frost Sullivan, speaking to us from Kuala Lumpur. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. Now, as Dawn just explained, using hydrogen to help in the decarbonisation of aviation, all the advantages are there. But she also spelled out, even very superficially, the limitations. So, for example, cost, having to build larger fuel tanks to contain this hydrogen. Do you see Southeast Asia excited enough despite these obvious limitations?
Sure. So there will be such challenges. So you mentioned about cost and space, but there are also some important challenges that we must understand, which are still under development, is about the storage. So you need to store it on the airport as well as on the aircraft. The second is refueling, transmission, supply chain. So there are multiple aspects that need to go into to make hydrogen a successful fuel for aircrafts. So that's one. But nevertheless, there is a lot of development happening in terms of hydrogen aviation, not only in North America and Europe, but also in Asia as well. For example, in Japan Airlines is working on it. They have had some collaboration partnerships to bolster the development and deployment in the future. South Korea, Korean Air, Incheon Airport are also working on some of this development. So there is definitely interest, if you say, in Asia Pacific, along with other regions, to adopt and deploy hydrogen in the future.
Mr. Shantanu, on the point about the cost and the fact that the amount might even be prohibitive in using hydrogen, is there a way or specific ways in which those costs can be lowered? So,
as with any other technology, once this hydrogen technology starts maturing, starts developing, there is more development, innovation, it matures in a few years, there is likely that the cost will come down. There will be new solutions that will support or address these challenges that we just spoke about. So this will make it more available, more efficient to use hydrogen despite some of its challenges.
Mr. Shantanu, I think we've all, both Dawn and yourself mentioned this, the need for redesigning because of the need for larger fuel tanks. So airplanes themselves, airports themselves, the refueling process in itself, all this will require redesign. So you talk about Japan and South Korea making some advances on this. Now, they're advanced economies. For other economies, not just do they have to meet fuel needs now, they need to think about transitioning. How do you build your infrastructure so you meet needs now and also at the very same time build for the future? Is that being done?
So it's a slow process, I would say, because currently aviation stakeholders are looking at short term as well as, because so there is SAF. We have SAF, which majority of airports, airlines in the region, be it developed economies or otherwise, are working on it. So, but on the backside, they're also thinking about hydrogen in the long term. Of course, it will take some time. There's a lot of cost involved in it. Definitely, they will require investments from other stakeholders for it to progress. But it is a slow moving thing. And of course, because the technology from an aircraft perspective is also still in development, there is some time still till we can have a hydrogen aircraft flying or even hydrogen hybrid aircraft flying. So I think the development which is happening from an ecosystem perspective with airports, it is in a way, I would say, going at the speed of the development of aircraft as well. So once you may have more development for the aircraft starts happening, similarly to support it, the development of infrastructure airports will also start moving in the same direction.
Mr. Shantanu, with hydrogen being considered, is it a foregone conclusion that airports in the region, even including Changi Airport here in Singapore, will perhaps have to take into consideration the use of hydrogen maybe one day and to include that infrastructure in their plans?
So every airport, every country has set a 2050 timeline for net zero in aviation. And hydrogen is one of a very important aspect of that, achieving that goal that has been set. So when it comes to Changi T5, I believe when they come to planning, when they come to establishment, they will be getting into some feasibility studies. They will have to look at whether it's possible, and if it's possible, how is it possible? How should they do it? So it is most likely that they will have some sort of infrastructure to support hydrogen going forward in the future.
Well, thanks for joining us this evening and that analysis as well. That was Shantanu Gangakhedkar from Frost & Sullivan in Kuala Lumpur.